It did. It's good. It's good that everyone's getting in and settled in. I'm appreciative of that. Taking a few moments to collect yourself, collect your wits. As folks are still coming in from outside, we'll tarry for just a moment to allow them to find their way to their seats. Certainly appreciative of everyone's presence here today, and I also want to welcome everyone. It's good to see everyone out today. We have a growing Sunday morning crowd of folks as folks are beginning to be restored from being relieved from their quarantine or overcoming their illnesses and able to be back with us. And I want to welcome everyone to our study this morning. We'll be studying from Luke chapter 9. We're continuing in the L.A. Mott book that's on our workbook. If you don't have one of those workbooks, they are available in the vestibule. Before we get started, though, let's start with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for all the blessings that you've provided to us today, for the life and health that we enjoy, for this opportunity to assemble here peacefully and in quiet to consider things from your word. We pray, Father, that you will help us to come to a better understanding of what you preserve for us, that we'll learn those things, that we'll be considerate of each other as we're learning those things, and we would learn, most importantly, the things that you would have us to know to be a better service to you. It would equip us to be aware of our opportunities to serve and help us to serve you, and especially to be better able to explain why we do the things that we do, why we believe the way that we do, to those who may inquire. Be with those, Father, who are separated from us today because of illness or being tended to by others, or perhaps that they are traveling or are having to work. We pray, Father, that these hindrances will be cleared from them, that they will soon be able to return to our work and worship together as well as their everyday walks of life. Father, forgive us of our sins. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, in Luke chapter 9, we're having again a very, very busy lesson the previous two, and it just seems that they're getting more and more stuff packed in. But we find the apostles being singled out here. And this account is also preserved for us in Matthew and Mark with some additional details. But basically, he gives power to his apostles. And this is, I think, the first time that perhaps we've seen a mention of them and actually being given something that is specific to do, given a mission or a task. It's talked about, he gathered them. He's talked about the time that he sometimes spends privately with them in preparations or teaching them privately. But at this point now, he's actually singling them out, and he's giving them a task. What's that task? To go and to proclaim the word. And if you just read it in Luke, it's kind of like basically the instructions are pretty brief, aren't they? He imbues them with the power to be able to confirm the word with signs and wonders and be able to do healing in particular. But he's entrusting them with taking his teaching to some of these surrounding villages, and basically in preparation he says, "Go as you are. Don't take any extra stuff. Don't take extra provisions. If you're only wearing one tunic, just take that one. That one's enough. And you're going to go and basically live off the land. Live from the provisions that the people that you teach will be able to share with you. And if you go into a city, you go and they don't hear you, they don't accept you, then leave. But if they accept you, then stay with them and continue to teach them." Matthew and Mark also contains the details that he sends them out in pairs. I don't think Luke's not mentioning that here. So it's not just a go and scatter, but basically go into the regions, apparently the same kind of regions where Jesus had been teaching, and as a recognized disciple of Jesus, continue to teach those in those regions. Perhaps they went in some places that they didn't. Maybe that was part of the mission that Jesus wanted them to go, is reach some of the smaller places, or maybe some of the places that he'd been wanting to go over the past 18 months or so, but then maybe hadn't gotten around to. Not giving a lot more specific about this. But he basically releases them to go on this mission, and in verse 6 it says they accomplished that. They followed Jesus' directions. And in fact, in the other accounts and such, and it talks about when these disciples, these apostles came back, that they rehearsed, that they explained the things that had happened, that they brought reports back to Jesus. Not that, and that's an important part, I think, of that mentoring process that he's doing. And he's not preparing them to be messiahs, but he is preparing. They are his disciples. They're basically, this is an opportunity, kind of rubber meets the road, kind of an opportunity for them to put his teachings, his preparations into action. And so it's kind of an apprentice assignment or something like this. And actually, it's an opportunity for them to put what they've learned and their abilities, and plus the power that he lent to them, into action in performing this particular mission. As this is going on, we're mentioned here that Herod, the Tetrarch, he's perplexed. He's confused about Jesus. And in particular, it mentions about Jesus' identity. And Herod's particular confusion here is he's wondering if, in fact, having dispatched John, that this is some kind of a spirit or some kind of some kind of retribution that the supernatural world is coming to make his life miserable, because they have some, and they're both talking about the kingdom of God. They have some overlap, I guess. They have some marked differences about where they were preaching, the regions that they were preaching and such. But the message about repentance and righteousness has not been wasted, not been gone without notice for Herod. And in fact, he gets the word on the street. What's the word on the street as to who Jesus is? Elijah, or that one of the prophets of old has risen. And he's wondering specifically, why is this coming about right now, shortly on the heels of what I did as far as killing John. It's interesting to me that in verse 8, or beginning earlier, about what Herod supposes, is this is apparently the rumors that are going about Jesus. And when later on in this chapter, when he asks Jesus asked his disciples, or his apostles, who do you think that I am? Who do people say that I am? They parrot this almost word for word. And so this is a common misconception. I don't think that Herod was such a scholar or follower of Jesus and his teaching that this came to mind, but he probably asked his advisors, and they asked the slaves or the merchants, or asked in the marketplace, and this is they brought back the reports. It's basically what people, the common perception with Jesus as someone of note. Maybe he is John the Baptist come back, or Elijah, or one of the other prophets. But he's someone of note, but we're not quite sure. There's not a common understanding in the street of who Jesus is, despite the fact, even among the people that he's interacted with. So this is something that's growing. The disciples would certainly have a better explanation of that, if not for any other reason than the things that they've witnessed and heard him say firsthand. But they're at this point still on the steep part of the learning curve. It's not like even though they've spent all this firsthand experience of Jesus, as we're going to see in this chapter, their understanding about him is still gelling. They're still not quite sure what to make of of Jesus. And even when you would think of all the stuff that they've seen firsthand, like the stilling of the storm by his words, the raising of the dead, the healing of people from distances, even the issue there with the woman that touched the hem of the garment, it just touched him and was healed. The demonstrations of faith that Jesus calls out, that Jesus could have, in that instance, I don't know if you thought about that in the last lesson, he just could have let it brush off. So the woman's faith her faith was exonerated and it healed, and she was healed. She got all the benefits that she came looking for. But instead, he makes an object lesson. He commends her faith out in the open for the benefit of his disciples. That having seen those things and such, that when it gets into this situation where he's preaching late in the day, and after this is after his apostles have returned to him, they're giving his report, and actually separate out to a town in Pisidia to spend some time, I guess, reviewing that and his hearing about their experiences and teaching him. But the crowds are still followed, and Jesus teaching them, and they're being healed, and they're listening to the teaching, and it's getting late in the day, and the apostles come to him and says, we we really need to send these people home. We need to dismiss them so they can get supper and find some lodging, because it's a big crowd. It's 5,000 plus, and we really don't have anything more for them here. And Jesus suggests to them, but basically we'll give them something to eat, or you can give them something to eat. Now, their reaction is, well, let's take inventory. That's the first thing. It's a very human reaction. Well, what do we have? What are we going to feed them with? Well, we got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Lord, that's not enough. I'd like to think that, we would get it, don't you? Don't you like to think that if you were there, you would say, I've seen this. Let's just follow his instructions, guys. He knows what he's talking about. You'd like to think that would be us. But I'm going to say, my memory is probably pretty short too. And even though I'd gone out to villages in Jesus' name and using his power and taught his lessons and healed the sick, here's a chance to put wheels on your learning. Actually, now that you know that, what do you do differently? Here's a chance to do one of those. And I got to say, I'd probably come to the same conclusion: is that we don't have enough to feed these folks. Fred? Exactly, and that's a unique aspect of power. It's not merely he can change what's there; he can alter it in some way. Here's a guy that can't walk, and I can make him walk. That's remarkable enough. But literally creating something from nothing, creating something by command, is astounding, and it's even a different kind of power than the stilling of the storm. Because that's just exercising control over what's over there, what's already there. What about exercising control about what's not there? Bringing something into existence. And he feeds this big crowd of folks with this pretty humble guy. Now, 5 loaves and 2 fishes probably wouldn't have gone very far within the disciples themselves, the apostles themselves. They probably didn't have enough to feed themselves, much less all this crowd. And so they're concerned about what are we going to do. Doesn't extend to, well, we're here with a man of God, the Son of Man, a man that God sent, a man certainly a great prophet, much less Jesus the Messiah, God the Creator, and that realization hasn't fully sunk to them yet. Despite they literally have gone to Pisidia so they could tell Jesus about what they'd been doing over the past, I don't know how long the mission was, how long that they went out, but they were basically telling Jesus about their experiences wielding his power. And yet somehow or another they got this blind spot about how are we going to feed these people. Again, I can't be too harsh on them because I'm probably right there. So looking and counting, and said, if only we had a few more, if we knew, we could have sent somebody to the market and been prepared. But suddenly now it's on us. And Jesus didn't say, don't worry about it, I'll feed them. He says, you feed them. And I don't know, he doesn't mention that he gave them this kind of power to make stuff. He gave them power to heal and the power to cast out demons. But it doesn't mention that he shared this power with them. And so I don't think he's intending for them to exercise their power to do so. But I think the lesson is that he's expecting them to think about who they're bringing the problem to, and just to follow his instructions. Yes, Ryan?
I also think this is a great example of Jesus prepping them for when he's gone. Because he said, if you break it down, there's 3 different things. Okay, what do we have? Let's take stock of what you have. Let's pray for it, and let's go act on it.
Okay.
And that is the lesson that he's trying to teach them here. You can't make something from nothing. I can't.
Yeah.
So let's start with what you have. Bring it to me. Then I'm going to make it something, and then you go use that thing that I made, and you go help.
Let me try to summarize that again for if the class, I would kind of wander over there and they would have heard you, but I kind of pinned here with the stream. But basically, Ryan notes that this is a great example for basically preparing his disciples. Is it giving them basically follow my commands, trust what I've got. We will pray. We will exercise our exercise. I'm going to provide, and you take the provisions and feed the crowd. You take what we take the plan and execute it. And I think it is. He's demonstrating this and even having this conversation with him that Luke he could have just taken control and taken care of everything. He could have miraculously just made everybody not hungry, sent them home full. He could have, had them all check their bags and find their suppers in there. There's lots of ways that he could have done this, but he did this for the benefit of his disciples and to build them up and to make preparations for them. Now, this wasn't this was a feast, right? I mean, they gathered baskets of leftovers. I mean, everybody presumably ate their supper, and then there were literally baskets of leftovers from, again, it's a very, 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 very small beginning. It wasn't to impress that, look how much extra that we've got. It was basically, this detail is recorded for us so that we can appreciate the magnitude of this miracle. It wasn't just enough so that people didn't feel peckish. Everybody ate their fill and there was baskets of leftovers, which again, it impresses us with the magnitude, the power of Jesus and meeting this particular need. Yes, Beck?
You talked about this wasn't about excess, but there was plenty. Everyone got what they wanted sufficiently and left over. But I think if there might be a hidden lesson here also about appreciating God's generosity. God doesn't just give us enough to live; He gives us an extraordinary amount. And if we take this and apply that over to our own lives and look at, wow, I don't just have a car, a house, electricity, or food. I have clothing and shoes and a job, and they can provide
Sure.
ways to hopefully set for a future when I'm not even going to be here. If God is so generous that the world is around, and the leftover take up here just kind of dawned on me that we don't appreciate that God doesn't just give us enough sustenance for this. Right? When the Jews were wandering in the wilderness, He gave them manna. And He took care of them, but that was to get them to a place where they could have their abundance that was promised to them. And here we are seeing Jesus do this with a crowd in sort of a subtle lesson kind of way. I'm not here just to give you the only exact steps to have a covenant relationship with my Father and get to heaven, but to show you in real time the abundance you have here. Think about how much more that's going to be when you get there.
And it is an exceedance of blessing, not merely meeting the need, but exceeding it as part of the lesson. Again, it wasn't to intend, as it's a recruitment ploy. Said if you want to eat good forever, come join us. That's not what the promise is here. The promise is basically that these folks had gotten late into the day into the teaching and didn't want to break off, and Jesus didn't want to break off from teaching them. And so He impromptu fed them on the spot so He could teach them longer and their needs would be met. Not come back tomorrow and I'll feed you again. That's not the point of this. The excess of what was provided was that it was 12 baskets. I thought was interesting because I think that's supposed to impress the apostles. That there was exactly 12, that there were 12 of them, and they were doing, He said, you feed them. And when the baskets got connected up, that there was 12 of them, I think is a divine coincidence. That it was the emphasis again to me that real teaching here is not to the crowd, but to make this lesson on the apostles, which Ryan was calling attention to earlier. That this is something they can reflect back on as being part of their preparation to carry out His mission when He's going to be gone, because that's actually the place in the story that we're turning. We are at the knee in the curve here. We're at a significant moment, and I believe is the very first time that Jesus is going to share some of this information with them. So having performed this miracle then, they're out in another place praying alone, and He asks the disciples the question, who do the crowd say that I am? And we've already alluded to this here. They pretty much parrot back as to what the word on the street is, who Jesus is. But then Jesus raises it, makes it firsthand more personal and says, who do you say that I am? And this is where we have, rather famously, Peter's confession. And to the extent that Peter really understands this, I don't know, but he's listened to what Jesus has said enough to be able to provide the correct answer. To say that he embraces this and understands it in depth and can explain it to anybody else's satisfaction is, I think, an overstretch. But by comparison, by the firsthand experience, by virtue of this firsthand experience that Jesus has had with them, he has at least learned the principle. You may not have all the theory, you may not have all the practice and the application down, but he's at least learned the principle. And having extracted this confession from Peter, I don't say extracted like he's interrogating him something, but he's coaxed this confession from Peter. He now begins to talk about the mission in a way that he hadn't talked about before. And he has to get them to this point. He couldn't have led with this. He couldn't have just rounded them up in the first week and said, "Oh, by the way, there's going to be this grisly murder in Jerusalem, and you're going to be eyewitnesses to it." That's they weren't prepared. They couldn't have possibly begun to understand the import of the coming events without going through all the things they've gone through up to this point. And we're still going to have this problem of this shallowness, the shortcomings in the knowledge that we're going to be dealing with for another year or so as Jesus is beginning to come to this inflection point in his mission. And having begin talking about this and opening the discussion and begin disclosing to them about this is the rest of his mission, about what's ahead of him. That it's not this isn't going to go on indefinitely. That we're going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to be mistreated in a horrific way. And that's a load to take. I don't know how far if we were there with the apostles, we would be thinking about, well, wonder where I'll be in a year or 5 years, or what's your career path? I don't know that they were really thinking very much about that. But certainly now he's disclosing things to them that he hasn't talked about up to this point. And it goes to the next section beginning in verse 23 there about sacrifice, about this idea about taking up your cross and following him. This is like walking the last, the euphemism, take up your cross, is like we might talk about walking the last mile. The euphemism for the people that are condemned that walk the last mile after their last meal to the death chamber where they're electrocuted or receive a lethal injection. That's the euphemism that he's using here, and it's not a sunny, happy one. It's not, when he says, take up your cross and follow me, that's a shocking euphemism to try to use. And it's designed to get and to focus their attention and the fact that being a disciple isn't all going to be like this mission that you just had. And we aren't really told anything about the villages that refused them, but obviously they had a lot of success. And that's reported in some more detail in the other Gospels about the fact that they accomplished the mission that Jesus sent them out. It's not all going to be successes. As a matter of fact, it's maybe going to end in a way that's profoundly unpleasant. Like I'm telling you is going to happen to the Son of Man. That's what's going to happen to me is probably and going to be in some measure what's going to happen to the rest of you. And he starts talking about this in really stark terms. This talk not just saying that about the gaining and losing of lives. That's significant, and that has a parallel or perhaps a spiritual and a physical manifestation. But when he talks about taking on discipleship as bearing a cross, people wear jewelry, wear pins and pendants and that sort of thing. They talk about wearing their cross, taking up their cross for Jesus. This is not that. This is not something that's a superficial sign, not a pin on your lapel or on a hat band or something like that. That's not that kind of an outward show. This is a show about what you're ultimately doing with your life, and may actually result in a loss of life to gain the spiritual life, or that those who may be given the opportunity to gain their spiritual life may elect to refuse it so that they can enjoy their physical life. And that's going to be a stark reality about the effect that the gospel is going to have on people. But ultimately, the stakes couldn't be higher. It's not something that human beings are always prepared to think about. Well, how does the situation that I'm in right now, I need my car serviced, or I need something done for me, or someone's asking me to do something for them. How does that play on the spiritual ledger? How does that prepare me or not prepare me for the life after this one? That's just not the thoughts that come to our mind. We have to train ourselves to think that way. And that's what Jesus is indicating here, that you're going to have to, your teaching is going to have to get beyond just the superficial, what's going on in my day, what's on my agenda today, or where I hope to go on vacation, or what kind of promotion that I'd like to be working toward. It's going to have to move beyond that and thinking about way beyond that to the life beyond this one, to be able to allow us to have a value system that will put us in a position where Jesus won't be ashamed of us, or we won't be ashamed of Jesus and bear the consequences for that. So this is weightier stuff. I mean, it's like he spent all this time in preparation, and particularly with this smaller group. And he's done the preparation. Now he's moving out of the 101 material into the 201 or perhaps 301 material. He's he's sharing more with them, disclosing more to them, putting more burden on them, raising the bar and expectations on the group of the apostles. Now, a lot of this may have been collected here for this particular moment and this particular occasion, so that Luke could tell us all about it here. But I think it's all happening about the same time. That quite literally, we are in an E in the curve. We're getting a change in direction in Jesus' mission. It mentions specifically, as we're moving on a little later on in this chapter, that he turns his face toward Jerusalem. Now, he's not going to rush there. It doesn't mean he's moving with all haste to get to Jerusalem, but instead of kind of meandering around or having kind of an itinerant visiting around in Galilee and stuff, he's now going to be headed toward Jerusalem. And all the things that he does are in support of this mission to get to Jerusalem. And this is something that we'll be reminded of several times in the next chapter. But it really, Luke calls it out and begins to mention it with a lot of regularity, beginning here in the 9th chapter. I think that now is the time, given that it's time to head toward that last phase or the last parts of this particular mission. Now he begins disclosing this. Quite literally, that old Jerry Clower storytelling. I told you that to tell you this. That all this stuff that he's been doing in preparation and such, he's now telling them, has been in preparation of being able to receive and to try to assimilate and digest and make sense of the next kinds of stuff that he's going to be telling them. This is also, I think, an important distinction. You may remember, this is not maybe the only time that Peter, James, and John were kind of working privately with Jesus, or working in a smaller one. You may recall that when early on, before he actually picked them as apostles, he asks Peter to take his boat and push off from shore so that he can teach the people on the shore. And then they have the miraculous catch of the fishes, and he calls his business partner, James and John. So Peter, James, and John were there kind of getting a firsthand experience there. Maybe that was the very first time that this occurred. But certainly this is going to be different. This inner circle, this grouping here, where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, is going to be something we're going to see as a repeat. And so he separates them out here, and what do? Hazel, I see your lips moving. They go up on this mountain. And again, this mountain's a private place. It's a place suitable to pray. Suitable for a private audience, but something much more remarkable happens there. What happens when they go up on this mountain? Is it an all-nighter? The disciples stay awake all night and hang on every moment that goes by? No, they get fatigued, and they're weary with sleep while this amazing thing happens. And I can hardly even think. I mean, this is. In 2 Peter 1, verses 16 through 18, Peter writes about this. And in John, beginning in John chapter 1 and verse 14, when he talks about the Word becoming flesh, and we beheld his glory. Peter and John, in their books, give eyewitnesses accounts referring to this amazing thing. Heretofore, John the Baptist had seen the Spirit of God descend like a dove on Jesus and heard God's testimony of him. But I'm thinking, and it's possible that other people were there to see that too, but that was really for John's benefit. And so John has had an inkling as to the coming of this particular day. But Peter, James, and John have never seen anything like this before. And indeed, human beings haven't seen this kind of thing before. Of Jesus being manifest as not being just the the physical, earthly God, my teacher who I've left my business and have followed, which these guys did. But Jesus, the Son of God, the Son of Man, God manifested as man on earth. They're getting to see that. And they say that while he's up there, that his appearance changed. That they saw beyond the limitations, the veil of his physical appearance, which is written about in the prophets as being nothing special. That he wasn't a David-looking kind of guy. David looked the part of king warrior. His countenance was fair, and he was a busting heads kind of busting Philistine heads kind of warrior, and a talented, kingly man. He was good looking. He talked good. I mean, he was really cut quite a visual figure. And in contrast to that, Jesus has said not to have that kind of appearance. He looked like nothing. He looked just like somebody on the street, any citizen. Nothing that really set him out. He wasn't especially nice to look at. And Jesus begins to shed that here, and his godly glory is manifested on earth with this very, very private audience. This is something that's amazing. We see these special effects in movies and such where, dazzling appearances of power. And I think this is kind of that. Maybe that the writers may be thinking about a God on earth kind of a manifestation like this is being described here. What was the effect of this display upon these disciples, Peter, James, and John? What did they recommend? What was the recommendation that they share? Tim?
They wanted to memorialize this event by building three tabernacles.
Okay. I don't think these tabernacles were, I think it's literally, let's stay. Why leave? Can it get any better than this? This is fantastic. Let's just stay here, Lord. This is fantastic. And not merely to show homage or let us serve you in this fashion by building you a place to stay, but let's just stay here. Why? This doesn't have to end. And that seemed maybe like the sensible thing to do at the time, as given the circumstances they were in. But what does it do? You recall what Jesus and Moses and Elijah were talking about? His departure, which is the trip to Jerusalem, which is the arrest, the humiliation, the crucifixion, the death. I think that's what Luke says that they were talking about. I've always kind of wondered, how did Peter, James, and John recognize Moses and Elijah? We don't know, but maybe they just drew the conclusion. Maybe they were introduced, or maybe they talked to each other on a first name basis and said, this is Moses, that Moses, yeah. I don't know. But the recognition of who they were in the presence of was not wasted on these guys. And as Peter, it kind of takes the lead and maybe takes the idea off the top of his head and makes this recognition here. As a result of Peter's suggestion, what's the response? The voice. God appears in the form of this voice from heaven, and it actually decides that this cloud came over and settled on them. It talked about them being on the mountaintop and going into the cloud. Well, I don't think the mountaintop moved. I think the cloud came down. And in this cloud, God's presence was manifested, and he offers what testimony? This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. This is, again, no matter what you thought about the presence of Moses and Elijah, they don't get the recommendation from God. And that's not to say that God disregarded them. And obviously they're with God, and God sent them there to be with Jesus at this time. But the clear emphasis is that if you were going to cast honor, if you were going to establish rank, that Jesus is the one, he's the focus of this attention. And I think that it's going to be very important. As again, we see it as they're returning this testimony in their books of talking about this specific event. and it made the impression that it made on them and such, but it was so strong. That's what Peter basically said. We didn't follow fables. We didn't make the stuff up. I'm telling you what I saw with my own eyes, what we experienced. Not, something that somebody told us about, but something that we experienced firsthand. And that's the, after this, then now that being after God's testimony and such, the event ends. That Jesus is alone, that Moses and Elijah aren't there, and that his appearance, I think, returns back to normal, and they come down the mountainside. He, again, amazingly, that they don't tell this, and that they don't tell everyone that they saw at this time is still amazing. That's astounding to me. Maybe they doubted if they really experienced it. Maybe they doubted their own eyes, or weren't quite sure. Maybe it was such a powerful testimony they really couldn't put it in order. Because it starts, we kind of get wrapped around the axle too. We start thinking about Jesus. Well, how could he be God all the time? Fully God and fully man. That just doesn't make sense to us. How can he do two places at once or two beings at once? We don't understand. We struggle with that. And they may have the same kinds of struggles. Chris? Could be. And maybe they just wanted to get more information so they could adequately explain it. That after you think about, well, what did I really see? And, could I explain it in a way that is adequate? The suggestion of events here moves pretty rapidly. Fred? Absolutely. They would eventually. And they kept silent and didn't reveal it, maybe because they realized, again, because of that final note of God basically stepping in and trumping all the previous ideas and basically saying and establishing that order. Maybe they were waiting to be given specific instructions that they could share this. I don't know. Later on they did, though. They didn't keep this silence indefinitely. It was part of their testimony as apostles before him. Having come down, though, having returned down from the mountain back to the village of to the rest of the world, this great crowd is still assembled, and these disciples there are struggling with trying to heal this boy. This man has an only son, and this son has an unclean spirit in it that damages him, that causes him harm. Makes him mute, gives him seizures. Obviously, there's concern not merely for the inconvenience that are involved, but concern for the boy's life. And unfortunately, his disciples haven't been able to remedy the situation. Jesus does remedy the situation, and if you read the other accounts and such, he talks about the man having faith, not the faith of the boy that he'll be healed, but the man having faith that Jesus can heal him, and the man replying, "I have faith, Lord, but help me in my unbelief." It's recognition that the faith that I have, if it's dependent upon my faith, make my faith significant, make my faith significant enough or in bounty enough to be able to accomplish the healing. He's wanting, no matter what the price, to be able to have his son healed. And Jesus, in fact, does this when his disciples were unable to. And the other accounts talk about their subsequent discussion about why they were unable to do so. And Jesus even chides them about their lack of faith or their failure to apply prayer. The demonstration that Jesus is the one for the mission, though, can't be lost upon Peter, James, and John. That having experienced that, having gotten this portion firsthand, that can't have been, I think that detail couldn't have been lost on them. He then, again, and beginning in the following verse, in verse 43, and Luke establishes this, Luke also mentions this, about the people that were witness of this, giving the glory to God. And Jesus then taking, again, the opportunity here to talk about his death. And he says, "Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men." And it mentions specifically they're not understanding this saying. And I can't blame them for not understanding this saying, because there's so much to it that has to play out and has not been yet revealed to them. but that he's trying at this point, and having before not really talking very much about this part of his mission, but now with his face toward Jerusalem and with this confession, this demonstration of revelation of who he is to at least some of the apostles, he begins to talk in more transparency about the coming days. Luke here again records that, yes, Tim?
Not only human, but he's also God. He then immediately after coming down off the mountain, takes care of this unclean spirit that the rest of them can't. He's a powerful one, more powerful than anything else. And then this message is, I'm going to get killed.
Yeah.
This is a paradox.
Absolutely. It's a struggle to understand. It's a struggle for us to put it all into place. It said even the conceptual, the theoretical part of it, never mind it being eyewitnesses to it, and trying to make sense and make order of these particular events. But part of it is that they're being confronted with these things when they themselves aren't of a keen spiritual mind, as demonstrated in the next section. The next two, the understanding about how things work together is that they began to kind of contest among themselves about, well, who really is the greatest? And maybe this was a boast on, Peter, James, and John part. You would not believe what we just seen. But it said, that would be counter to the previous verse that said they didn't tell anyone about what they had seen. These guys, jockeyed for position. They had at least a gentle competition with each other, and that was their mindset. Their mindset wasn't, we're on the greatest mission of God that He's ever undertaken. We've got this very important thing that we got to do: go to Jerusalem and help Jesus do. Their mind really wasn't on serving God. Their mindset was, which of us is going to have the best position? And when the kingdom comes, what are we going to be doing in the kingdom? And not, how are we going to serve, but what rank are we going to enjoy, right? In those days was literally worthless. Not to his folks, but yeah, in terms of what's the worth to our community, the child was probably the lowest unit. And yeah, he begins to make these comparisons and challenges their thinking. That's the point in this whole section. It's to challenge their thinking. Is that they're jockeying around about which of us is going to be the most important, and then he has to deal with that and the fact that they've got this kind of jealousy. Then when they see someone else is doing the work, he says, we tried to stop him because he's not one of us. And that again says that that's kind of very me-centric, isn't it? Obviously, it wouldn't be important. If he was important to Jesus' work, he would be here with us, right? Because we're the ones. We've enjoyed this favor. He's telling us all this good stuff. He's giving us some of his power to exercise. We're pretty good stuff. And they're kind of, the human side is taking that idea and kind of running with it, and it's running in the wrong direction. And Jesus is attempting to right that and help them while they're assimilating this information and trying to make sense of things. And the fact that he's told them some difficult things, he's trying to keep it in the right context and help to steer their experiences, steer how they understand this from merely being my firsthand personal experience, which was pretty well the bound. That was considered to be pretty much fair game in the Jewish first century, is that you kind of made up decisions. You made decisions about what you did with the law and how you responded, and your what you thought about things was you were given license to pursue. and to elevate to being the place that motivates your thinking. That was kind of an embraced way of how you got along in the first century world. And Jesus is trying to shake them out of that box and get them out of that mindset and think beyond merely what's my experience or how does this impact me? And think beyond that. And these kind of things are in a particular challenge to this. Very briefly, he intends to go forward, and he sends advanced people to make preparations, be able to find them lodging and find them what they need, make arrangements to buy their provisions and such. And they go to this Samaritan village. Now, the author calls our attention to the Samaritans, and the Samaritans were not thought highly of, let's say the least. And they were the people that were populated the land that interbreeded among the Jews and the other nations that the Assyrians and the Babylonians brought in. They were of mixed heritage and were distinct from the returning Jews who came back and restored the temple. We studied about this last summer. And this is the relations between these people and their ancestors up to the first century. The relations between the Jews and the Samaritans hadn't really improved. That they had as little to do with each other as possible. And when these people in the Samaritan village heard that Jesus had his face toward, or he's on his way to Jerusalem, which is, probably they heard about that from the disciples who said, our master would like to come and stay here at the inn. He's on his way to Jerusalem. And when the Samaritans heard that, they said, nah, we decline. He can find someplace else to stay. And so this friction, this centuries-old friction, is here manifested again. This stands in stark contrast to what we think about maybe the episode at the well with Jesus and the Samaritan woman that actually turned out very, very well. But nonetheless, this animosity is interesting. And it's also kind of interesting here that James and John basically saw this happening, and their response was what? Let's burn them to the ground, Lord. Let's just call down the fire and burn them. Which is really, really ironic because, in a decade or so, John is going to be among those that go from Jerusalem to Samaria to lay hands on them so that they can further the work of the gospel. So John gets a chance to maybe eat some crow or, eat your own dog food sort of thing here. But, James and John's response as the sons of thunder, that was kind of the nickname that was given to us, is kind of borne out here in a big way. And then Jesus closes where, again, he's got disciples, people that want to follow him, and they come and they bring circumstances that they need to take care of beforehand. And Jesus ultimately says that you got to, priority-wise, you need to follow me first and foremost, which is a hard saying. It's a hard saying for those disciples with these reasons of things that they needed to take care of, but it's also a hard saying for his disciples who probably thought the same way. That, hey, you got to first things first. You got to take care of your dad. You got to take care of burying. You got to be able to go say goodbye to your family before you go off on this mission. And Jesus said, no, you've not thought it all the way through. If these things are more important to you than following me, then you need to think about it some more. We'll pick up on chapter 10 on Wednesday.